this fits well to our yesterday lessons. You can prohibit something on paper, you can make a ban, but in the reality, people may not follow this and may do whatever they want. And it may end up at the same, what I explained, where we have in Afghanistan a good population of the animals, although now there's also a ban, but there has been for many years a totally lawless situation. And on the Tajik side, there had been a ban, the animals were all shot. What we need to think about if we talk about the use of a wildlife population is we need to look into reproduction, into mortality, and we need to look if the hunting causes an additive or a compensatory mortality. Reproduction is clear. The animals have young every year, a certain number, and a part of the animals of each age class will die. So if the mortality and the birth rate are the same, then the population is stable. If the birth rate is higher than the mortality, then the population will grow. Usually under natural conditions, the population tends to grow until there is some factor which regulates it down. It might be the availability of forage or generally the availability of space. This is what we call the carrying capacity. The question is now if we hunt, and hunters often say that their hunting causes only a compensatory mortality. This means maybe 10% of the population would die anyway every year. The hunter shoots 10%, so this is approximately what will die anyway, so that's why it doesn't make a difference. The problem is that the hunter, of course, never can know which of the animal will die naturally, and that's why often hunting mortality is additional mortality. It's not compensating for the natural mortality. Maybe in some extent, but not in a scale that actually has an impact on the population. So that's why if there's too much hunting, the population will fall down. Trophy hunting on very old animals, like the one you see on the picture, this is a pig-up, this died naturally, that's what has been killed by a smaller one. If hunters would only target this old age class, then you can actually expect that this animal would have died the next year or the year after anyway. It already contributed to the reproduction. There are still enough younger male animals, so this would not have a significant impact on the population. That's why in our project we usually try to support trophy hunting, international trophy hunting, where foreign hunters come, shoot very few, very old animals and pay a good bunch of money for this. And the local people are by this motivated not to shoot the younger ones, because they know if they shoot the younger ones, then there will be in the future no old ones to sell. Unfortunately, there is not such a big market for this type of hunts. Hunting has a bad reputation in many Western countries. There are few people who are willing to pay a lot of money for killing an animal. There are quite some wealthy Americans. There have been recently the auctions from the Wild Sheep Foundation. The most expensive wild sheep was, I think, $350,000 for one sheep hunt in Montana. In Central Asia, the hunts are not as expensive, but there's 200 goats, we can also get in the range of 100,000. What we have today in our little workshop or seminar is about a population which is hunted in a non-selective way, meaning you hunt the ibex without caring it's a male, it's a female, it's a young. So basically the take of animals takes place throughout all age classes. This has the advantage that you don't have a selective pressure, because if you always shoot the biggest ones, especially if they are not as old, there is a risk that those which grow fast, they die young. So those who stay smaller, grow slower, they live longer, and they can have more years a chance to reproduce. And then the population in its general characters may go down. This happened in Canada with the bighorn sheep, where all rams were actually shot at a certain age, at a quite young age. So those growing slow would more reproduce, and so that the offspring will also have smaller horns and so on. then they have to change their hunting. But if you take only a small number of the old ones, then it doesn't matter. So, how is population growth? We express for our purpose population growth in percent of the population. So, if we have 100 animals, how many will be added? So, it consists, of course, of the recruitment. I took here recruitment because it is, I'd say, it's more than the birth rate. Recruitment means those animals which already get into the age class where they could reproduce by themselves. It's actually not really important if you have a female ibex and she has twins, and the next year she has again twins, if they all die, then it's not a population growth. A population growth becomes at the moment when the young come into an age where they can reproduce themselves. That's why in the recruitment we consider the mortality during the first 2 years. Then we have the mortality of the adults, of those which are already able to reproduce, and this mortality we need, for our purpose, we just guess it. I looked a bit in the literature. I found something from Kazakhstan where they assumed that the mortality of the adult ones is 5% per annum. But I actually did some calculation and found that there are only 5% dying per year. Quite a big number of animals should become 20 years old, which in the practice you never see. And it's highly unrealistic because of all the teeth were bared off from the hard grass they eat and so on. So a more realistic figure might be in the range of 10%. And you can imagine the males, they have a lot to fight for the females. They have to carry these heavy horns, which makes them also more vulnerable to natural predators. And for this reason, we assume that the mortality of the males is a bit higher than the mortality of the females. Recruitment mortality may differ by sex and we calculate it separately. So, how this may look like? I put here a few examples. This is just a copy from the Excel file. So, don't have it. Okay, somehow will work. So the general assumption at the top is what I use for our game as a calculation, and these are two examples what we found when we did wildlife surveys in 2 areas of Tajikistan. So this is actually the percentage in the population which we found, and then we looked how many kids per female. This is just an assumption. Most females beyond the age of 2 have at least 1 kid, and some have twins, and those who have twins may compensate for those who have none. That's why the 0.9 is quite a realistic figure. This I also took from this Kazakhstani example here. Then actually the birth rate, the fecundity may drop, or the survival of the youngs may drop, or the survival of the adults. Or you may actually add a factor for emigration from the population. So the surplus animals will just leave the territory because there's not enough space, there's too much competition. So, how this looks in the reality, if you try to count the animals, population will, after you hunt, it will grow. But if you shoot too many, then of course the production will be less. And if the population becomes quite low, those of you who have been hunting or know hunters will know that it becomes more difficult to get the last animals. So at a certain level, we will introduce a reduction of the harvest. So you may want to hunt 10, but you will get only 5. And if one group actually wants to shoot more animals than there are left in the valley, they will get none. Yeah? So there would still a few animals hopefully survive, except somebody exactly hits the point how many there are left. But of course your purpose is not to make this ibex extinct, but actually to keep the population at a level where you can harvest as many as possible without destroying it. This is all clear?
And you're all hunting in one valley?
Yeah, everybody hunts in the same valley. This is only one. You don't know how many there are. You can guess that there are quite some, but you don't know how many.
Do we know how much other groups are hunting?
This is not necessarily a secret. If you know it is good. If you want to hide it from the others, it's up to you. So you have to write down your number. You have to decide among yourself how many you want to hunt. We don't distinguish male, females, kids, yearlings, and you give then the number to Dasha or to me, and Dasha does keep it on the computer so that we know how many there are. We play God in terms of knowledge. God knows everything.
You said that there are 400.
No, maximum 400 will fit in, but doesn't mean there are 400.
What is like population growth per year?
Huh?
What's the population growth per year?
The population growth per year is 6%. So if there are 100, 6 would be added. If there are 200, 12 would be added. If there are 300, would be 80 added. If there are 400, 24 would be added. But 24 would not be added because 400 is the carrying capacity. So in that case, there would be only 10 added, and the rest would not find the space and would have to leave the area. So, and then the next thing would fall. What would you do with the ibex? You would also eat them. So, okay. Yes, this is so you can already think about the next season. You won't tell you how many there are, so you must assume by yourself what you think the population should be.
Okay, you all got these numbers that you've estimated, and now the next season,
now the next year,
to calculate based on the numbers you gave us what you can get based on the curves.
Should we consider, keep in mind that it should not get extinct?
It's up to you. It's up to you. If you want to make it extinct, you can do this. It's not I think it's not a right. It's up to you. You may think it's better to make it extinct. Today you get the most of it out. You open a meat factory, you get a lot of money, and then you will invest in something else. This is of course a rational decision. This would be like yesterday example of the RLC.
So it's up to us.
It's up to you. And it's also up to the others if they want to let you do this. So, any hunters ready for the next season? Are you done? Okay. Read this first.
So you think we should not hunting there?
So other hunters. So this is the closest now. Yeah, do say. So, your group, how many you want to hunt? You hunted already? Later, yeah? Okay. How many you want to hunt? A lot. Okay. So you can use it. Give me the flashcard and then we can put it. We put it on the screen now. How your population developed, and then we will. This we can leave. We need it for the discussion.
We need it.
Yes, we need it.
Okay, I'll open it as soon as.
You can open it from there. So you see at the beginning. The population was obviously high enough that all of you could hunt quite a lot. Yeah? So, what do you think? What actually happened during this exercise, during the hunt? It's actually it shows quite well the real world situation. So, think what happened?
We hunted a lot because there were more, and there was a decreasing population. We went stabilizing them.
Yes, exactly. You went down, yeah? So this means that actually you hunted more than the replenishment of the population was, and this caused a slow reduction of the population. We will now look how this happened. Yes. So this is how we thought the population would develop without hunting. Yeah, this is 300. And no, you need to put it down. Yeah, we'll switch it. Dasha.
Huh?
Just move it there.
Ah, okay.
So, and this is how the population actually developed. In your case, I think the last year was even not fully, not 100%, because I had prepared it before, and then we hunted the 13th year. And then year 13, the population dropped even below 100, and then it covered to about 102. So you see, you were actually not too far from the carrying capacity at the beginning, 250, and but you consequently hunted more than the production of the recruitment was, and so the population went down. What is interesting is here, at this point, here some of you thought you should actually hunt not too much in the hope that the population would stay stable. And you can open the other one, here this one, harvest. So here you see actually your strategy, how it changed. And you see most groups is the green group. The blue group actually started rather high. Actually all started rather high. Then they started to worry for me. This is somehow not possible. And started to reduce the harvest. Especially the green group was hunting very conservative, but also the blue group. Then you felt some competition, so you had the impression that the others hunt more. Isn't it? Yeah? Yeah? So some of you thought, this group hunts more, and we hunt so few, why should we? So the blue group also increased their harvest. The green group also suddenly increased the harvest, but only for one season, then again down, then again up. And the violet group in the middle, this was actually the most interesting one. I think this was you.
Yes.
The color is not exact here. So the group 2, you actually tried to hunt about a similar level, or rather conservative, but still a little bit over the carrying capacity. So what we should look at is this PowerPoint still there? Can you open it? Yeah. This is one. We need the last one. Yeah, exactly. So you can put into the presentation mode. So, what harvest was achieved by each hunters team, each of you have seen how much you got. I think the group who hunted, can you look at the totals just at the Excel? Yeah, it must be there to the right. Is it a total harvest? Oh yeah, you see? Each group, how much they hunted. So actually the green group, being very conservative over some years, like in other years taking a lot, they got a lot out of it, somehow on the expense of the others. The blue group and was actually the most conservative, it didn't look like this. And so the total harvest was more than 250 ibex over this period. So actually you managed to kill more ibex than there were originally at the beginning, and there are still more than 100 left. Yeah? So we can go back to the... So, okay, what happened to the population you have all seen. Now, what influenced your decisions? So, what did you, maybe each group makes a little statement. What did you think, actually?
If there's usually 20 per year,
Yeah.
400,
Yeah.
there shouldn't be more than 20 per year from
Yeah.
if someone else is
This is thought, yeah?
Yeah.
So we try to predict what other countries will do. So and try to be some kind of an equilibrium, not to decreasing the population, but increasing our harvest.
So
Getting your share, yeah?
kept in mind how much others will make.
Yeah.
So we can grow like half, little bit more than the
Yes.
growth rate.
We will.
And you? What you based your decision on? Or you didn't take it so serious?
No. So we didn't take it seriously. There were just 2 moments of weakness where we hunted a lot of islands.
Yeah.
That, I guess that was the 10th year, that was the final, right?
Yeah.
And we decided, it's the last
finishing.
year,
Yeah. It's last year. We don't want anyone else to have the islands.
So it happened really that some of you thought so the contract is finishing soon, so you may actually not care anymore as much about what happens. Yeah, isn't it a bit, yeah? And what I see is that you didn't actually much communicate between the groups. Actually, you didn't communicate at all. You only looked at what the others do, but none of you made an attempt to talk to the others. What I found interesting is some of you tried to introduce a very low harvest for some years in the hope that the population would recover. But you saw that the others are still hunting a lot, so then you went back to the high offtake. So what you should have done probably was to talk to the others and say, okay, maybe we should not hunt for a few years.
And you said you shouldn't talk.
No, you could talk. I said you don't have to, but you can. Maybe
Yeah, and I said you were all hunting in one valley, so...
maybe 5%, yeah? But this is, you cannot know. So actually, what is the difficulty that in the reality, often you cannot know how many animals there are. And this makes it so difficult. So this shows how important it is to have a good understanding about the resource. And this is for any natural resource management important. You need to know how much is your stock and how much is your increment, what comes on top every year, and then you should actually balance your use, that you only harvest the surplus and don't diminish the capital. And this is something which is very visible in this game, that with this level of uncertainty, you have big difficulties to balance it. Yeah? It would have been interesting if I would have given you the number, or a rough number, what would have happened. I aimed a little bit to bring what's close to extinction, or at least to the level where you get the feedback that you're overhunting, but this happened only during the last round, that's why it was a bit late. What do you think? Is this possible is such a game to show a little bit the reality and to use it as a didactic tool. If you, for instance, in the future work with your local people and your villages, this is something you can imagine to apply in a similar way. Yeah. Good.
Okay.
Yeah, then, thank you very much for participating in it.